Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith. And today, listeners, I've got a really interesting guest. Her name is Marie T Fraser. She's from the UK and she's a breakup and divorce coach and therapist. So good morning to you, Marie.
Hi, Lyn. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm sure the audience is going to be really intrigued to see what we're going to be talking about today, which I feel that it'll be around the theme of life during and after a breakup will be a good topic for us to discuss in this particular episode.
Absolutely.
So, Marie, just tell me a bit about, would you be prepared to share a little bit about your own personal experience around this particular topic and give the audience an insight into who you are and what's led you to be doing what you're doing now? Yeah,
for sure. Basically, I was married for 27 years and ultimately to a narcissist, and which was in the beginning, if anybody knows about narcissism, these people are incredibly charming and was hunky dory, but suddenly little things start to happen. There would be where my ideas or suggestions were totally ignored. For example, one of the houses that when we were moving, because we needed a bigger space, it was a house that I really, really did not like. I just got a really bad vibe about it. And, I said that I didn't like it. I couldn't see myself living there. It had got a really, icky feeling for me, but I was totally ignored. And he went off and bought it anyway. And it was really interesting because several years later, whilst living there, one of the neighbours told me a previous owner had committed suicide in the house. So, that was, when you're with a narcissist, you question your own sanity. It's almost like you don't believe what's happening, but you blame yourself. And I can assure anybody who is going through that kind of emotional abuse that it is not your fault. You do think you're going mad. And that was just one particular instance. There were very many instances where he would suddenly not appear overnight without any question or any explanation. And he did work away. So there was an element of lots of excuses of working away. And so I didn't sort of question a lot of it. Then there were instances when I had my first child, which was not a difficult pregnancy or anything like that. I was working, so I was, well and fit, and everything seemed to be hunky-dory. But when I brought my first child home, and I'm sure any other new mum felt like that, the shock of this new little life that's your total responsibility is overwhelming. And within 24 hours of getting home with this new baby, the husband said, "Oh, well, by the way, I'm sure I told you, but I'm off to South Africa to watch the World Cup rugby." And he thought it was okay to just leave me unsupported by anybody because we didn't live near family with a newborn baby and go off and have a boys' trip to South Africa. And it was like a surreal experience, really, as though I couldn't understand and I didn't believe that was actually happening. And, my emotions and hormones were raging as a new mom. And it sort of just happened. And these are things that sort of then led me to think, well, I'm not worthy of the support. There were so many instances in my life with him that when I look back, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm almost ashamed and embarrassed to admit that they actually happened. I tried to leave very many times. I mean, it was difficult because, first of all, narcissists are always right. It's everybody else's fault but them. Secondly, they don't like to be controlled. They want to do the controlling. So there would be situations when I would say, I really have had enough. I can't deal with this. And they weren't off the cuff moments. They were moments where I'd thought long and hard, because, I had two boys at this point, and one of which was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when he was 12 months old. So that was a huge shock, as one might imagine. You think you've got a normal, healthy child, to be told 12 months later, well, you don't. So there was a lot of grief and disbelief around my son's disability and that diagnosis. And I was still working full time in the city in London. And my bosses were absolutely fantastic. I worked for Americans, and, they were very happy to point me in the direction of, their pediatric neurologists, etc., in Boston and in San Diego, who were incredibly helpful. But nonetheless, it was a shock. And so what happened was, as Rupert's diagnosis was unfolding, I was spending a lot of time running around the country, finding, doctors who could help, as well as the guys in the States. And I just thought, I can't do this and do my job. So I actually stopped working and became a full-time mum to both my boys, which ended up to be, it was definitely the right thing to do. And also my eldest son was just about to start school. So that meant from becoming financially independent, I became financially dependent, which, puts a whole different filter on, being financially dependent with two young boys and, leaving financial stability. However, as time went on, it was obvious to me that the husband was having affairs, and every time I questioned it, I was told I was going mad and don't be ridiculous. So it was 1999 New Year's Eve. I'll never forget it, because we were going into the new millennium, and I said, I just can't go on anymore. I mean, I don't know whether this was the fifth or sixth time I'd sort of said this, but I just said that was it. And it was a bit awkward because my mum and sister had come over to stay with us for New Year. And so it was a very weird conversation. Well, let's talk about it in the morning, he said. And so I just sort of said, well, there's nothing to really talk about. We've been down this road so many times, and I feel like I'm going out of my mind, etc. And he talked me round again. And again, it's something that really embarrasses me. What was it that made me stay? I honestly do not know at that time. And, I'm embarrassed to actually say it. But, fast forwarding to 2006, I think it was another very, very difficult period for me. And I really was a sort of a vision of my former self. I was just mentally exhausted with everything. And there was yet another affair. But this time, my eldest son had found out. And that was just the sort of, I don't know, that just spurred me on. Once my child was sort of directly involved, for want of a better analogy. You know, the fact he knew about this,
Yes.
I just thought, my God, you know, what sort of a role model am I setting for him?
Mm.
And that was it. I just said, what happened was that his father and he had gone away on holiday skiing, and they were sharing the phones, the same phone charger. And my boy was then 15 at the time, just saw these messages between his father and some woman. And it hurt me to think that he'd seen these and kept them to himself and was ruminating over them. And it took him sort of 6 weeks to tell me about them. And it was that sort of mother bear in me, the anger that my child had been subjected to, that was just the fire that I needed to really put this relationship to bed, you know, to end it, which is exactly what I did. But then what happened, because, you know, the father is a narcissist. It took 7 years to actually get a divorce, because he decided that I was getting absolutely nothing, notwithstanding the fact that we'd been married all those years and what my entitlement was. And, you know, I'd sort of said to my solicitor, I said, I can't understand why this is dragging on so long, because surely his solicitor is telling him that there's no way he's going to win.
Mm.
But, you know, narcissists don't listen. You know, they believe they're right. They're the ones that are always, you know, being taken advantage of. And in fact, it's the other way around. They continually take advantage of people around them. As I said earlier, they can be incredibly charming, but once you're in their sort of grips, it's very, very difficult. So we were finally divorced in, let me think, 2018. So with all that hassle, aggravation, and 20 odd years of, well, it wasn't 20 odd years, well, I suppose it was nearer 20 odd years, but, you know, I felt, you know, not myself. You know, I wasn't the feisty corporate rookie that I was when I was in my 20s, etc. It was a relief to be free, but on the other hand, it was incredibly scary to be alone and with two, or by that time they were teenagers, but it was still incredibly scary. And having to process what I had dealt with for all those years. And, you know, and I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg here. And also, you know, trying to sort of be strong for my kids. You know, the most important thing I wanted from this was to be a role model for the boys and not crack under the strain of it all. And I just thought, you know, if this is happening to me, I'm not the only person. It must be happening to other people. And I just wanted to share with women that no matter how low you think you've got, you can bounce back. You know, if you process what's happened to you and learn to let it go, you can actually bounce back into an even brighter star. And I think it's important to share that with women who are going through difficult times.
Absolutely. So when you sort of had that conversation, when your eldest son found out about your husband having yet another affair, you said it took 7 years to actually get divorced. I'm assuming during that 7 years you weren't actually together. Did you actually separate?
That was quite interesting. Yes, we did. But what happened was that he worked away a lot, so would only usually be in the family home at the weekends. But after I'd said, you know, pack your bag and off you go, he just came back at the weekends as though nothing had happened. And I just said, after about the third weekend, I said, no. I said, this cannot go on. He said, well, you know, what do you mean? It was all, you know, surprised. Well, what do you mean? You know, I've come to see the boys. I said, no, this is not happening. We are not happy families. You're trying to pretend that none of this is real, but it is real. And therefore, if you want to see the boys, I will drop them off at a mutually convenient place on the M3, and you can take them for the weekend. So yeah, it was interesting. It was almost, and every time there'd been a major bus stop, you know, tomorrow was another day, and yesterday had never happened. And that's another thing that sort of sends you into this deep recesses of your mind, thinking, is it me? Am I going mad?
I feel that sometimes, you know, if you are in a situation like that, like you said, you know, because you, I suppose, don't want to think that you've made a bad judgment when it comes to relationships, because I think a lot of women, you know, they are intelligent people that are in these relationships, and they are almost questioning their own judgment. Well, you know, if I'm such an intelligent, loving, kind, authentic, truthful, honest person, how could I have made such a poor judgment in, you know, getting into a relationship with this person? And it's sometimes that bit of a conversation that we tend to have with ourselves, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. But, you know, especially with narcissists, as I say, you know, they are incredibly charming, and they're almost, they're very deceitful, because they have their own agenda. And it is that, you know, they will bide their time until they can pounce. And, you know, they don't mind if it takes years. You know, when I was, you know, before the children arrived, for example, and I was working full time, I was very, very, you know, I was very busy. So, you know, we didn't see one another that often. So, you know, when we came together, it was more socially, and, you know, we'd be with groups of friends and things like that. And it was one of the interesting things is when our first son came along, there was a dramatic change. It was almost as though the husband's nose had been totally put out of joint. And I did think, not at the time, but certainly a few years later, I wonder, he can't possibly be jealous of his own son, surely. You know, because my attention, quite rightly, was focused on the baby and its needs. Which was, you know, very, very interesting. But I do believe that, you know, narcissists can be incredibly jealous if they're not the center of attention the whole time.
So do you think in most relationships where, you know, the dynamic is that one person is, you know, displaying those narcissistic traits, that usually those traits are triggered quite commonly on the birth of a child?
I couldn't really say that generally. It certainly, I believe, was the case for me. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, at the time when all this was happening, I had no idea what a narcissist was. I just thought he was being incredibly unhelpful, unkind, and selfish.
Yes.
And it was only since I've done my various trainings that his behavior has made sense to me. Because I didn't know what a narcissist was.
No, I think it's become a more common term in recent years, to be fair, hasn't it, to describe these sorts of behaviours and traits in people. And yes. Let's be honest, you know, women can display those traits just as much as men can. It's not just, you know, on men, is it?
Oh, for sure. No, not at all. It's either sex can display these traits. I mean, you know, I think the biggest thing, which is a red flag, is when there's zero empathy. You know, if someone can't show empathy for you, then, you know, there's a serious personality disorder.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, women can display it just as much as men can.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make that clear, because we don't want to be, you know, in a situation where we're bashing men for displaying these traits when it, you know, it can be vice versa, can't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I'll be very honest with you. I am pro-marriage. I'm just not pro-misery.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's because I'm not suggesting that every relationship breaks down because one party is a narcissist. I'm just, giving you my personal experience of, what happened to me. But, relationships and marriages break down for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also those sorts of traits can be quite wide on a scale to, to extremely, toxic traits and behaviors to probably some sort of minor sort of little red flags in relationships that have those sort of tendencies and traits. So it's not like labeling all those behaviors as being narcissistic behavior, because I think there is a wide spectrum on what's bad and toxic and what's sort of the odd thing that might be acceptable that could be a similar sort of action or behavior.
Yeah, and I think what it does boil down to as well, no matter whatever end of the spectrum or what point on the spectrum you're on, is how you personally can deal with it. Or whether you personally can deal with it. It's sort of, I thought I gave my situation a fair crack of the whip. I didn't want the relationship in the beginning when it first started to get not very good after about 7 years. I didn't want it to end. And then as time, I was really loved this man and I was wanting to do everything and anything to keep this marriage together. And then when the boys were around, that was another thing to, keep me. I was probably still in love with him, but as what happened was, as the, after 27 years is a long time, and after all the sort of what I would call the sort of negativity and the emotional abuse, I had absolutely no feelings left. I didn't know whether, I certainly didn't love him, but I didn't know what I felt. I found it was impossible to be able to love somebody who could treat me like that. But there was obviously still something there. And I can only put that down perhaps to the familiarity of what I was used to.
Exactly. So what would you offer as advice and guidance to women? Because there must be women that are listening to this that identify 100% with your position and are probably currently in this position, who probably are in maybe that stage of actually still loving this man or feeling that they love this man. And that's why they want to try and make it work and want, and we all know that, it's not about trying to change him, it's trying to change ourselves that's going to have a positive impact, if anything, on whether that relationship survives, thrives, or ends. So what would be your advice, Marie, on somebody that can identify with probably being in this situation but still feeling they love this man?
Yeah, it's really difficult because deep down, the woman or the man, knows what they should be doing. It's just a question of finding the strength to break away from it, because you are the one that has to change, because for example, the narcissist, it will not change. It's like, very few narcissists are able to go to, say, a therapist or similar, because they never believe there's anything wrong with them. It's not their fault. So you can only help yourself once you've acknowledged there's an issue.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, because we can all make excuses for the people that we love, but that doesn't make it right. And at the end of the day, the only person that we're hurting is ourselves.
Yeah.
Because life is short, and to live it without fun and freedom, for me, is no life at all. And everybody's different, so I couldn't advise that somebody left their partner, but what might be helpful is to be able to talk it through. Because from my experience, trying to talk how I felt through with the ex-husband was like talking to a wall, because he just didn't get it. He just thought I was being difficult. I was being too demanding because there is no empathy and understanding. And it makes you feel very alone. So, you know, I did a lot of self-help and, you know, had therapy myself to be able to process what was going on for me, you know, and doing that, it then became clear that I was the only person who could make things better for myself.
I think sometimes as well, we can kid ourselves, you know, through romanticizing our relationship and looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, that we actually are still in love with this guy, but actually we're probably just more in love with the idea of wanting love and feeling loved, rather than, you know, actually truly being in love with that person.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think that doesn't really matter what age you are. I mean, I do find with perhaps older clients, it's more of a distraction, their age. You know, they will talk a lot about their age and, you know, I'm too old to do this or what have you. Nobody's ever too old or ever too young to change. No. You know, that's one thing that, you know, I really do bang on about. There is only now, and in this moment and now, you can do amazing things for yourself.
Absolutely, 100% agree. It's quite a tricky situation to find yourself in, and I understand, you know, it can be quite hard to have conversations with yourself around acknowledging that you might feel ashamed and guilt around accepting the behavior you've accepted, but just know that you're not alone, and that, you know, a lot of women can identify with being in that same situation, and it's not your fault. It's not your fault, but, you know, be honest with yourself about how you're feeling. And if you've ever said to yourself, I deserve better than this, then that's probably a big, huge red flag to start with, isn't it?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I just wanted to say also that it's so important to be able to talk to somebody. So, you know, if you have a trusted friend or a family member, then, you know, get it off your chest. For me, I was too embarrassed to share it with anybody other than a therapist, because what I was saying, well, one, my friend wouldn't believe me. And my family, I don't think they would have believed it either. And they would have been so upset, which is not helpful. You don't want other people being upset when you're upset. You know, you want somebody who's going to give you a bit of sort of support and... you
want an unbiased opinion, really, because...
Exactly.
Dragging family and friends in are going to give, you know, not that unbiased opinion. Plus, you know, if you do resolve things with your partner for whatever reason... you know, maybe that, you know, it's just a temporary and they're not a full narcissistic on the far end of the scale.
Yes.
Playing the worst.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Traits. You're going to sort of bias their opinion towards that person should you resolve the issues that you're currently working through.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's, if you are with a narcissist, you know, you will not feel you'll not feel listened to. And it's so important to feel listened to, that somebody gets you, that somebody understands what it is that is happening to you right now. So, you know, that's the biggest piece of advice I could actually give, is to talk to somebody else.
Yeah, and preferably somebody that, you know, can give you that unbiased listening ear.
Yeah. For sure.
So what's life like for you now then, sort of post getting through all that, Marie?
Oh, it's marvelous. And that sounds very but the thing is, I've always been a very positive person. You know, the glass has always been half full, but you know, for many years my glass was totally empty. And what I've managed, you know, to be able to do is to, well, if we go back, you know, I wasn't the girl that I was in my 20s. I wasn't even the girl that got married. over those years had changed me so much. Those life's experiences had changed me so much. But what I have done, and I'm so grateful that I've been able to do this, is to what I call rebuild and reinvent myself. Deep down at my core, I'm still the same person. But, with all those experiences, a lot of which were negative, I don't now allow them to define me. They're not who I am. And, this is really, really important. There are times, obviously, look, not every single moment of those 27 years was miserable. There were some very good times. I have my 2 beautiful children, for example, and I have, amazing relationships with them. But, I don't harp on what I have endured. They only come to the forefront if I'm writing about them for either interviews or newsletters, and I'll just sit back and think, dear God, you really put up with that, but I don't think about them. I'm still single, but that is my choice, and I don't think I'll be single forever, but it's not something that is high on my agenda. I have some fantastic girlfriends. I've got sets of girlfriends in different areas of my life. Some I go away with once a year, some I do theatre with, etc., etc. So I live a very full life. I love my job. I love what I do. It fires me up, helping people who have endured what I endured, and wanting to be sort of a beacon for them to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you can totally turn your life around. So from a health point of view, I've never been healthier, because the stress and strain of living in those circumstances was huge. So I'm just free. And I have a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Love it. Really love it. I don't think a lot of the time, if you've been through any sort of, whether it's a long-term or short-term, bad experience or toxic experience or unhealthy experience when it comes to your romantic relationships, that you fully appreciate, I suppose, the impact that might have had on you until you're out of it, do you?
Oh, for sure. No. And I think it actually takes a while as well. You don't realize right at the when you've split up at that moment. It took me probably a couple of years to realize the impact it had on me, because you don't want to admit it.
Yeah, and certainly going to negatively affect your mental and physical health too. And that, like you say, that you even noticed that improved as well as your whole life experience.
Yes, yeah, no, for sure. Stress and the emotional abuse. There's no abuse is good.
No.
I'm anti-abuse in any way, shape, or form. But with emotional abuse, there are no scars that you can see.
No.
And that just can play havoc on your mental well-being, truly.
And that mental well-being can then, result in stress, which can take on physical health symptoms, can't it?
Yes, yeah, no, for sure. There's sort of, there's so much research these days about, the sort of the mind-body connection, which I as you brought up, I really do believe that the two work in tandem, and if one is out of flunter, it affects the other one.
Yeah, most certainly. So, that it's always worth sort of considering if you are suffering any sort of types of stress or physical symptoms that could literally be down to your environment that you're in and the health of your current relationship, couldn't it?
Yes, yeah, it can. And especially, as you said earlier, Lyn, when you still believe yourself to be in love. Because it can be then very difficult to actually address if the problem is in that relationship.
Yeah, so it's been really truly honest with yourself. If you're actually saying things to yourself such as, I really don't deserve this, or you're questioning their, am I going mad?
You feel like you are.
Yeah, is it me? If you're saying any of those things to yourself, I think they're definite red flags, and it's time to sort of speak to somebody, as I say, preferably independent and unbiased, about how you're feeling, and whether this is you, or whether you're actually really experiencing something that you shouldn't be around at all.
Yeah. Another thing which I forgot to mention, actually, which only struck me, after the event, was that I would get a feeling about something not being right.
Trust
and that. I would honestly say, if you have those feelings, do pay attention to them, because, your gut and heart know much more than we think we do.
Yeah, and the mind will try and play tricks, won't it? Your ego mind will try and play tricks and get you to not listen to your heart and gut. But I think most of us know what we know, and sometimes we just choose not to listen to it because we don't want to admit it to ourselves. And like you said, we can feel quite embarrassed and ashamed about allowing ourselves to be in that situation, especially if it's been over a long period of time.
Yeah, but I was just something that came to me now, because, I had many instances where I had these feelings and I would push them to the side. So that was, if any of the listeners are having that, then do listen to, what those feelings are telling you.
Okay, well, that's been a fascinating conversation, Marie. So what I'd like to do is, for those listeners that do identify with some of what we spoke about today, and it's brought some stuff up, so to speak, and if you'd like to get in touch with Marie, then what would be your best contact, Marie?
I think the easiest one, Lyn, is my email, which is quite easy. It's marie@mariefraser.com.
Marie with an IE at mariefraser.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And for any other information about Marie and other contact information, as usual, we'll put in the show notes. So thank you so much, Marie. That's been a fascinating conversation today.
Thank you for asking me, Lyn. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
And on that note, as I'll always say when I wrap up our episodes, true love starts with opening our hearts. So listen to that intuition, listen to that guidance, because you'll find that it'll always serve you. And so until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.